but after testing some, he just found, all of his theory crafting just really didn't break the way he wanted to, so he was looking for a different deck to play on the drive here to Cleveland, and he put himself in conversations where he would get answers that Bant Heroic was the right answer, which I could admire. I could really admire that. And to his credit, he's 10-2 with the deck, so maybe it was the right choice.
I'm interested to see this matchup play out too, because typically decks that don't have a lot of removal and are trying to block to defend themselves are very good matchups for heroic strategies. They're good at ignoring blockers for the most part, or making creatures that are so large that blocking becomes prohibitive. It really pressures your removal, and Chris is really only working with a couple copies of Dromoka's Command and a couple of copies of Valor as stance in his main deck.
Chris going to play Temple of Plenty. Top card on his deck is, of course, of Krufix, so he'll decide if he wants to keep that or not. You saw Ross attack last turn with his favorite Hot Bite until a Sylvan Carry added. A pretty tough block for Chris to make there, just because of Defiant Strike.
Yeah, there's no way that Chris is going to tender a block there.
Yep.
Chris has kind of got to get his board set up a little bit, and then he can start looking at blocking. But if he lets himself get tempoed out of the early game by blocking and getting involved in unfavorable trades where Ross is cantripping the whole way through, Chris is going to get buried under creatures that are too large. A card to look out for in this matchup also for Chris, and something that works to his benefit, are his copies of Death Misraptor, because even if creatures get too large, Death Touch can still handle them.
Yep.
So unlike most conventional blockers, where even things like Pelucrano's size can get invalidated by the size of the heroic creatures, Death Misraptor can block even later on in the game.
Take a look at Ross's mana base. We call it Bant Heroic. It's typically just white-blue with a splash of green. And he has the Forest already, which is not great. And it's very clear that at this point he doesn't have blue mana. So I believe he has an Ordeal of Thoughts that's stuck in his hand. So he's kind of playing just like a weird white weenie game at this point, which are just a couple of small white creatures.
The splash is not free.
No, it's not. And there's no guarantee that his blue source will enter the battlefield untapped as well, as he has 2 copies of Temple of Enlightenment and a copy of Temple of Mystery. Yes, he does have 4 copies of Manic Influence, 4 Flooded Strands, and an island, but we'll see if he's able to draw those, as Chris Andersen is going to play more of Cranderson, his nickname.
I mean, what you rattled off there, only 9 total sources of untapped blue mana.
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
Dromoka's Command. +1/+1 counter here. There will be a fight somewhere in just a moment.
Now, Chris trying to get not too fancy here with the Dromoka's Command and just kill something while Ross is tapped out. Traditionally, the play pattern that you want to do against heroic strategies, but with Ross having some redundant creatures in play, it's risky here because, if Ross fires back with his own Dromoka's Command, for example, this might not amount to very much.
Yep. He's going to go after the favorite Hoplite, leave Seeker out there. +1/+1 counter on the Morph. Morph could be a Den Protector or a Death Misraptor. Pass that turn back. Merriam will draw a card. It's another Ordeal of Thoughts and no blue mana. And doesn't look like a copy of Dromoka's Command in hand either. Now, what's interesting in this situation is Ross has been attacking straight up, and I thought maybe Chris might block that time. No guarantee, obviously, and maybe that Morph is a Den Protector, and he says, I'll take this damage, and I'll unmorph it, get back my Dromoka's Command, and really beat you up. Blocking is definitely dangerous. I think if Chris blocks there, it probably works out just fine.
I think that Ross's card in hand is Johnny's present. So if he really values that Morph, it would not work out okay.
Sure. Merriam with a bunch of cards in hand.
And keep in mind, Ross has missed a land drop last turn and is missing blue mana. So Chris might feel like if it's my mana against his mana and I've got some tricks in hand, I can win the battle because there's only so much Ross can fire back with.
That was a really good draw this turn for Chris. It was a copy of Whisperwood Elemental, which is pretty huge in this situation because now he can really change the way he wants to play this particular game. He can play a Whisperwood Elemental, Manifest, and that Manifest can get in front of a Seeker of the Way, and it really just cause some problems.
Yeah.
I think that might be what we see him do. Dragonlord Roach-Tai is obviously an option here as well, but Chris is going to play his Whisperwood Elemental, take 1 from the Manic Influence. There's the Manifest. And now we'll see how he wants to go about blocking, because he will have the option to do so here in just a moment as we go back Merriam's way.
And I like to playing Whisperwood this turn against Dragonlord Roach-Tai because Ross has 3 eligible attackers, and playing Whisperwood Elemental leaves you with 3 blockers.
Here they come again. And the great part about this attack here from Ross is he's been kind of bluffing some different things. Defiant Strike, you've mentioned Johnny's Presence, God Willing is kind of a card in this situation, but he really has no choice.
Yeah.
Not attacking, it's almost indirectly conceding the game.
I was about to say, it's tantamount to a concession. Once Ross stops attacking, then Chris gets to leverage all of his expensive cards. He continues to build up his shields with Whisperwood Elemental. Another thing about Whisperwood Elemental is because it's generating manifest tokens, it means God's Willing is no longer a route to ignore all the blockers for one turn and push through. So Ross just has to keep attacking and hope that the outcome is good.
Now, Giant's Presence is fantastic here because it gives all of those creatures +1/+1 thanks to prowess. And it'll give an additional +1/+1 for Ross to be able to kill the Whisper Elemental. So everything works out really, really well here. It forces him to have that exact trick, I think, in that situation, but he did. So Ross is going to be able to keep working through things here. He's at 26, life total doesn't matter a ton. Chris is at 6, Chris still looking to stabilize.
Still with some blocking left to do, but Chris, you see with Dragon Lord Ojutai in hand, and do you feel comfortable you can tap out for that, or essentially tap out for that threat right now? I would not. But Chris also needs to continue to develop his board because Ross is missing land drops and missing blue mana, and you have to imagine that if Ross finds an island or another source of blue mana, that there's just going to be an avalanche of spells, and if Chris is playing too fidgety, too defensive a game, he still might get pushed out.
And again, the big question here is, what is that more for Chris? Is it Den Protector or is it Death Misraptor? You could certainly make an argument that it could be both, but also, you know, if you're Ross, you're probably thinking, well, you know, if it was Death Misraptor, he probably just would have played it straight up.
Exactly. I think it's easy to err on the side of it's probably Den Protector because Death Misraptor gets cast face up a bunch, particularly against heroic strategies where you really want to have a Death Touch blocker available.
Dromoka's command is going to give a +1/+1 counter to Sylvan Caryatid. And then the Morph fights the Seeker of the Way. For Ross, he's still drawing cards, but he still hasn't found lands, no blue source of mana. So those Odile Thasas, they're not going to be cast anytime soon. You see the favorite Hoplite in his hand. The Green Band Trailblazer as well.
I really like pushing the Caryatid up to a 1/4.
Me too.
Which means that even with Ross generating one spell, Chris has one safe block against one of these copies of Seeker of the Way. Trying to overload on the Morph leaves your Caryatids at 0/3s rather, and then a spell suddenly becomes very problematic.
There's favorite Hoplite, and that's a passing of the turn. And if you're Chris, that's a huge victory.
Yep.
Because now you get to unmorph, and it is Den Protector, which, given the way that Chris has played the game, you could probably deduce that. He's going to get back Dromoka's command here. He's going to take one to cast it. And when you're playing against Ban Heroic, especially if you know the list very well and you're intimately familiar with the standard format, a single green mana doesn't mean anything.
Right.
No giant growth, no become immense, none of that nonsense. So you're clear for takeoff here with how you want to use Dromoka's command on this particular board. Chris may have some interest in maybe putting another counter on another Sylvan Caryatid. We'll see.
Yeah, Chris's priority right now is probably just shoring up the defensive as much as possible because Ross is at 26, and he's likely to gain more life as well because of the 2 copies of Seeker of the Way. So, you know, Chris is in no rush, essentially. He's trying to lock Ross out of the game, not really turn this into a damage race.
You do have to be wary, of course, because Chris is taking some damage from his lands at this point. So, you know, that Mana Confluence is having a minor effect on things that you want to make sure if you're Chris, all right, I just don't want to get God's Willinged out of this thing. All of his creatures are green, so Protection from Green will put a creature through. Maybe if there's back-to-back of those, you just don't want to have, you know, you don't want to lose that combination of cards or that particular card.
Totally agree, and Chris has some options to shore up that liability right now. He has both Dragon Lord Dromoka and Mastery of the Unseen in his hand, so he can either generate a manifest token, which can block in spite of God's Willing. Same thing is true of Dragon Lord Dromoka, because now he has a white/blue blocker to go along
Dragon Lord
screen.
Ojutai.
Ojutai, excuse me. Dromoka's command, Dragon Lord Ojutai.
Yes.
Dragon Lord Dromoka would actually be a disaster if you're trying to play around God's Willing.
That would be good for the little lifelink action, too. So,
well, if you actually get to untap.
Yes.
Which I think is unlikely against Ross right now.
We'll see which route Chris wants to go with those 2 powerful cards in his hand. 4 and 5. Looks like he's going to the dragon. It's hard to pass that up. I suppose he could play both spells in one turn if he'd like to. There is Dragon Lord Ojutai. Pass that turn back. Ross will draw. It's a Windswept Heath. And he does have God's Willing in his hand.
I had to imagine a third land's helpful. I mean, I'm sure Ross would much prefer blue mana, but it's at least something to get the ball rolling a little bit.
Going to go down to 25 after sacrificing this Windswept Heath. Plains coming. Can't be a force. There's only one of those in his deck.
I think that Ross may have Monastery Mentor in hand.
It does.
And if that's the case, he may be able to go wide against the defenses that Chris is trying to set up right now.
The good thing here for Ross is he's got a lot of life to work with. So
Yeah.
it's not like Dragon Lord Ochitai is breathing down his neck and is going to kill him in 2 turns. He's at 25. That's a lot of life.
Got a lot to play with, and if Chris decides to go on the offensive with Dragon Lord Ojitai, well, that's one less blocker on defense.
Monastery Mentor has arrived. Chris will draw a card. It's a copy of Whisperwood Elemental. Here comes Dragon Lord Ochitai. Chris is going to go on the offense. Take a look at 3 cards. He'll get to take one of those with him. Flooded Strand, Elvish Mystic, and looks like Temple of Plenty are the 3 cards he's looking at. In his hand, Master of the Unseen and Whisperwood Elemental. So some good options all around here for Andersen. He has selected a card. It looks to be Temple of Plenty.
And I like taking the Temple here. Your instinct maybe, why not go and take Elvish Mystic because it's an additional blocker? I think that Chris has plenty of blocking right now, and if he's going to lose the game, it's going to be to something like Aqua's Form or some protection from green effect plus something else to ignore the various manifest tokens in play. So at this point, Chris is better served scrying for more action, a card to light this game up, some sort of lifelink effect, rather than take an Elvish Mystic and lose to the same cards he's playing around anyway.
Any way that he can check God's Willing is ideal.
That's got to be the first order of business here, is make sure that God's Willing on its own does not kill you at any point.
Ross going to play God's Willing on his upkeep target. Favorite Hoplite. There'll be prowess triggers here. 1 on the Seeker of the Way, 1 on the Monastery Mentor, which means the Mentor is a 3/3, and he also gets a token. Looks like that card's going to stay on top. Maybe it's the blue source he's been looking for. Nope, Defiant Strike. Defiant Strike may just be better than a blue source.
I mean, with Monastery Mentor in play and all these prowess triggers and heroic stuff, if he's not taxed on the mana, it's essentially the same look at blue mana this turn. Then scrying to the bottom would be, because you still draw the card.
Yep. See if it's going to be Strike or Trailblazer. Looks like Ross is leaning towards Defiant Strike. I suppose the question now is, what is he going to target with it?
Well, the question from Ross's side, the sort of process he's going through right now is, can he chain together enough spells where an Alpha Strike with its eligible attackers makes any sense? Or is he basically just attacking with Favorite Hoplite and getting a chump block this turn because he can't push through the defenses? Favorite Hoplite at this point is free to attack with because it has the can't take damage clause attached to it because it's already been hit with a hero trigger. So if Ross feels like he can't generate an attack with anything else, he may as well continue to target the Hoplite and what have you. If that's not the case and he feels like he can make an attack with other creatures, then he might consider spreading that Defiant Strike out, depending on how he anticipates Chris blocking. But I think this turn, most likely scenario is only the Hoplite can attack, and Chris is just going to chump block with whatever. Or potentially not chump block, because there's a large Sylvan Caryatid in play.
Indeed. Here comes Ross. There's a block. And there will be another block, I believe. Maybe not.
I think probably with the Caryatid.
Okay, fair enough. Didn't move it forward.
Right.
He's not taking the damage, as that would be lethal. Take a draw. Looks like it'd be a Windswept Heath.
We talked a little bit earlier on the broadcast here how Monastery Mentor, if there's a decline in red decks and you're kind of allowed to build up your board a little bit, this card has the possibility of starting to slide into some more decks. And you're seeing it on display right now. I don't think any other card would really give Ross a puncher's chance in this game, given how suited Chris is to block. But Ross may be able to go wide enough where he's able to steal this first game.
Magic feels like the kind of card that's going to steal this game. Or it at least has the ability to steal this
He's
game.
got a chance at a spot where I don't think anything else really gives him a chance.
Here comes Dragon Lord Ochitai again.
I suppose Aqua's Form is still quite powerful.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Ross, none of those in his main deck this week, and has him in the sideboard. Chris looking at 2 Yakumaya Coast and a Courser of Crufix. So the Dragon Lord is hit twice. It's working away at Merriam's life total. I say slowly. It's weird to call 5-point hits slowly, but just getting the job done slowly.
Ross has gained a lot of life this game from his Seeker of the Ways. So, and Chris, of course, has to be extremely careful with any attacks on the ground because he may need every available blocker to prevent Ross from killing on the way back.
And Chris decided between Corsair and Yavimaya Coast here. And the decision is, Corsair would be an easy card to take because it's an actual card, but land might actually be good here in this situation for Chris because he has Master of the Unseen in his hand.
Exactly. It's not clear. In Corsair, the Crewfix is not really shoring up much of the liabilities of the same card that Chris is worried about. It's another green blocker in a sea of green blockers.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we just need one more player for a booster draft. If you'd like to draft, we'll get that started right away. Please come see me on the stage.
Little manifest, pass that turn.
And see, Chris didn't even bother casting the Corsair because his upside is way higher, manifesting into a creature that he can unmorph and gain a bunch of life. And he wanted to give himself as much mana available to potentially do that. I believe Whisperwood Elemental yielded a forest. So,
Okay.
But you see, Chris definitely understands the state of affairs right now. His best case scenario is just gaining a huge chunk of life, and adding another blocker to the table does not do very much.
Ross going to finally get to cast one of these Ordeal of Thassa's. It's been hard for him. The Ordeal will net a prowess trigger for Seeker of the Way, a prowess trigger for Monastery Mentor along with the monks, and he gets himself a brand new monk, and now he's coming into the red zone.
And Ross is representing a lot of strength here because he tapped his mana in such a way that he cannot cast Dromoka's Command if he draws it, which means he kind of already knows what he wants to be doing here.
Chris is going to sacrifice his Windswept Teeth. That is telling that he's tapped his mana in such a way that Dromoka's Command is not an option. You mentioned that he is representing a lot of strength. I certainly agree with you there. What do we got flipping up here? It's going to be a manifest. Okay. Yep. There's a Plains. Yeah, we'll have to see what cards that Ross does draw in this situation. That's actually going to be kind of interesting. So there's your other card. Here comes 2 cards. One is in Ajani's presence. That's a big deal. Maybe he just felt if I draw the Dromoka's Command, it's not really going to have a huge impact.
Well, it's curious that Ross would not even really permit himself the option. So that means he has some plan for double white mana, God's Willing plus Divine Strike, Ajani's Presence plus X.
Yep.
Look, it's a very curious tapping, and it's definitely going to influence the way that Chris wants to block here.
Yeah, because if Plains plus Forest are available, it's different than if double Plains are available.
It doesn't imply anything necessarily because Ross could want to cast Dromoka's Command among many other possible tricks. By leaving up double white, he's kind of saying, I have 2 single white mana tricks.
So you have to play around the combination of Ajani's Presence, Defiant Strike, God's Willing.
Ross is saying, I don't even want the option of casting Dromoka's Command if I draw it.
Okay.
Which is a very bold thing for him to declare right now, and we'll see how Chris wants to block that as a result.
Well, he's got a lot of blocking to do. Remember, there's already been 1 prowess trigger. And there can be another one on the way with Ajani's Presence in his hand. And if he has another white spell, that could do it too. This game is a real demonstration on how powerful Monastery Mentor is.
Yeah, exactly. With Ross not having something like Aku's formed in his deck, there's probably no way for him to conventionally get out of this bind.
I think Ross actually just had 2 1-mana white spells in his hand. Yeah, God's Willing and Ajani's Presence, which is huge here. There's Ajani's Presence, and he's targeting the Monastery Mentor because he wants to keep that alive. However, you're going to get a bunch of prowess triggers now.
Yeah, I was thinking that
God's Willing, excuse me.
This combat was going to go really well for Ross, and I've just neglected that there's going to be 2 more prowess monks coming as a result of all of this.
Yep.
It's good stuff.
Not only that, you see the God's Willing, which will allow Ross to scry and maybe find another spell. That top card's going to go to the bottom, so it'll give him another chance at it with his draw step. God's Willing's going to resolve. But we can't forget as well that he's had that other Ordeal of Thassa stuck in his hand, so at the very least, he's going to get at least 1 more prowess trigger next turn.
Yep.
Because there will be a next turn. He's at 19. There will be a next turn for Ross. I'm not sure if there will be a next turn for Chris. Bunch of damage dealt now. Chris is going to lose a healthy amount of his board.
Yep.
And Ross is going to lose basically none of his and can keep adding to it.
Yeah, it's better than, it's actually quite a bit better than doing nothing here. He's actually got some more tokens for his trouble.
Yep.
And all those tokens are lethal or are kind of implied to be lethal.
They're basically lethal. Chris gonna look through his graveyard now. Den Protector in hand, or at least acting like he has that.
He just drew Den Protector, but even Den Protector, unmorphing, gaining 4 life, getting back Dromoka's command, and doing something with Dromoka's command may not be enough for Chris to survive next turn. Ross has 7 creatures in play against 3 blockers on the other side of the table. All those attackers are lethal even if Chris gains a good chunk of life, or are likely to be lethal because of prowess triggers and what have you.
Legacy players, your pairings for round 4 are now being posted.
This has been such an interesting game to see Ross be stuck on 2 lands for such a long time with Plains and Forest, not even Plains and Island, Plains and Forest, and make this kind of comeback.
Yeah, this shows exactly how tough it is to beat a deck like Ban Heroic if your plan is to block.
Yeah.
Because Chris has had every tool you could really want here. He's removed multiple things. He's cast Dromoka's command several times. He had a Whisperwood Elemental generating a bunch of colorless blockers, and we're still in this spot right now where I don't think Chris can even go down the Den Protector line because he's just going to die. Too much is coming back on the way.
He's going through a lot of math right now about how he can maybe stay into this game, because he is going to get a manifest from Whispered Elemental. Maybe a Dragonlord Oshai is going to hang back on defense, has Master of the Unseen in play, and he has a Morph to play in Den Protector, and we can't forget about the Courser of Crucifix in hand. So there's a lot that's going through his brain right now. For Ross, he knows, okay, I'm not going to die. That's step 1, and my attacks next turn are great.
And if Chris has to hang back with Dragonlord Oshai, that's an indicator to Ross that Chris is just barely holding on.
Yeah.
Because he would definitely want to be anticipating anything for 5 this turn if he could afford to do it.
Den Protector going to be flipped up. This is at the end of Chris's turn after the manifest has already happened with the Whisperwood Elemental.
And if Chris wants to use the Dromoka's command right now, it's a little bit problematic because it means that Ross gets another. If Ross has some sort of trick here,
Which he does.
it means that he gets to get an additional monk here on Chris's turn, which is then eligible to attack.
Good sequencing by Chris as far as flipping up the Morph after the Whispered Elemental trigger does resolve, because he gets the life right now. He gets an additional life
Yes.
with the manifest. That's why he waited. He wanted to get that manifest creature into play to get additional life and push himself up to 7, I believe. And now he's going to do a little bit of fighting with Dromoka's command.
And Ross is thrilled to see this Dromoka's command occurring on Chris's turn.
Yes.
Because this is one more attacker, and that additional attacker may be enough to get lethal coming across.
All right, Legacy players, are we still having fun? Try harder. Are we still having fun? Excellent.
There will be a fight here. See if Ross wants to actually use the Giant's Presence. I think he would want to.
I just want another token.
Yeah.
You have 50 minutes.
And when he's staring at Ordeal Thoughts in his hand, he's like, okay, I'm going to trigger Prowess again. I already know that. Chris is at 6.
And Chris is tapped out. I mean, this is all on the table. 8 attackers on Chris's side versus 5 blockers. And Chris is at 6. Any spell kills him.
Yep. He just drew Dromoka's command. Yeah. He's going to play Ordeal, trigger, everything gets Prowess, bunch of monks. Here's Dromoka's command. That's a second spell. This gets something out of the way. More Prowess trigger. He's basically going off at this point. Gonna kill something. I guess this. So that's out of here. And yeah, now he gets to attack for lethal. Of course, he gets to draw some cards as well. And Ross even says, yeah, everybody's coming into the red zone.
Yeah.
And that is going to likely do it.
It's over by a lot.
Oh, yeah. What that is a well-played game by Ross, for sure. But that's a demonstration on, and we've said this a couple times this weekend, if red decks and red removal work their way out of the format, Monastery Mentor can be an insane Magic card.
That was the idealized form of Monastery Mentor. When people saw it on the spoiler and they were imagining what it was going to look like, that was the game right there.
Think about White Blue Heroic or other Heroic decks where there's no other card that gets you out of that situation. Maybe Helios Pilgrim for Aqueous form, but then Chris can just get back a Dromoka's command and maybe still work his way through that, not even having to win the fight, but just say sacrifice an enchantment. there may have been no other card that gets him back in that game besides Monastery Mentor.
Yeah, it was very, very impressive. Certainly the way that Ross's deck is constructed, that was the only out. And it looked like Chris had a very commanding board there. Ross was missing land drops, didn't have blue mana for nearly the entirety of the game, but Chris was unable to remove Monastery Mentor, and that alone doomed him.
These are the kind of games that if Ross Merriam does qualify for the Players' Championship that you will remember. This was a very, very important match for him if he's looking to make top 8 this weekend and get that Season 2 invite. He's up a game here over Chris Andersen with his Bant Heroic deck. We go to the sideboards. We'll start with Chris.
2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 copies of Stratus Dancer, a Valorous Dance, a Drogoka's Command, a Glare of Heresy, a Plummet, 2 copies of Encase in Ice, 2 copies of Hornet Nest, a Mastery of the Unseen, 2 copies of Negate. The cards that really stand out to me here are the Glare of Heresy, the Drogoka's Command, and the Valorous Dance, things to fight the battle over creatures. I think Hornet Nest is a fine potential sideboard card here as well.
Other side of things here for Ross, he's got himself 2 Ordeal of Heliod, 2 Aqueous Form, a card that we talked about in that matchup that would have been helpful. 3 copies of Encase in Ice, 3 Stubborn Denial, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Treasure Cruise, and a single island.
So this is an interesting dilemma here. I think the 2 copies of Aqueous Form definitely come in. Chris's game plan is to block. Aqueous Form is very powerful there. There's some other cards that look like they would be good, but I'm not positive they are. For example, Encase in Ice would feel good against a deck with a lot of green cards in it, but first of all, Chris has Drogoka's Command, and second, a lot of his creatures do things even if they're tapped. You know, Den Protector still gets something back. Whisperwood Elemental still does its thing, so I'm not sure he really wants to go down that road. I think the 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke are reasonable for Ross here as well. Chris has a lot of powerful, expensive cards. I'm not sure about Treasure Cruise in this matchup because Chris really isn't killing stuff. Normally you want Treasure Cruise for control matchups where people are going to be loading up on removal spells, filling up your graveyard with creatures, and then allowing you to cast that card pretty easily. Chris really isn't doing that. So it's possible Ross leaves the Treasure Cruise in the sideboard, but the games will go on for a pretty long time if Chris is punching back. So maybe you want an additional copy of Treasure Cruise or 2 for some staying power.
Chris Anderson's going to be on the play here for game number 2. We'll see if he can find a 7-card hand that he does like. We'll see if Ross can get the W and get out of this thing. I think that Ross does have a pretty good matchup here. Heroic really preys on decks like this.
Exactly. I mean, there's very little in the way of removal in Chris's deck, and we saw just how bad that was for Chris in that game.
Yeah.
Where he built up a board of a sea of blockers. I mean, he had Whisperwood Elemental, Mastery Unseen, a lot of expendable creatures, and Ross was still able to just punch his way through it eventually.
Chris happy with his hand, as is Ross. We're underway here in game number 2. A forest to begin things for Andersen. Windswept Heath from Merriam. There's you have my coast. This is Sylvan Caryatid. Merriam going to sacrifice. We'll have a plains coming. There's a plains. A Manic Influence. Ross will take 1 for Hero Iros.
And Ross has got to be thrilled playing in a matchup where he can be very liberal tapping out for creatures early on.
Yep.
Especially post-board in most matchups, you got to do this song and dance here of trying to make sure that, you know, if you deploy one of your threats, you have God's Willing or at least the ability to represent it. Here, Ross can just kind of cast his stuff because Chris has a very limited range of removal spells.
It's a Hornet Nest. A card that is pretty good against Heroic, though Heroic can work its way around it in some roundabout ways. Aqueous Form, Stratus Walk when they're playing that card. That's not the end-all be-all, though it is annoying.
It's a good starting point. I do believe Ross does have one of his sideboarded copies of Aqueous Form. It's a little harder to lean on that card against a deck that's with Drogoka's Command as well. That's going to be risky for Ross, but he can work around this Hornet Nest right now, and I do not believe Chris has a way to do anything about Aqueous Form in hand right now.
There's Aqueous Form. That'll trigger Heroic. And it's into the red zone. Can't block. Scry 1. Top card, bottom card, very quickly for Merriam. Follow up, Defiant Strike. Wants to get a little bit bigger, wants to start pushing through a bunch of damage.
Yeah, Ross is doing this in large part because he has Seeker the Way that he could have played post-combat, for example, but not a lot to be gained by doing that because Hornet Nest is currently locking out other potential attackers. So Ross is better served just going big on one threat that can't be blocked rather than trying to play a bunch of stuff, which is get locked up by the Hornet Nest.
Bunch of mana, maybe Whisperwood. Yep. And Whisperwood's great, but Aqueous Form somehow is better than that right now.
It's a strange deck. It's not necessarily the proudest collection of creatures and spells, but in matchups like this, it looks pretty good.
I know the red deck is the garbage can. Where are we at right now? I don't think we're in the garbage can.
The draft leftovers?
Okay, got it. In we come. It's an attack for 4. Aqua's formal scry. That's going to go to the bottom 2. And what's interesting here is I think, and I had a feeling you might see this, Ross wants to do this in increments that make sense. So attacking for 4 here, when Chris did 15, versus attacking for 5 just makes more sense. It's less turns.
It's a full turn. And I believe Ross had a spare God's Willing, so it's not like he's worried about giving up on that. And the benefit of that is he gets to cut an entire turn out of the game. You can see Chris's hand is just Den Protector, Fleecemane Lion, cards we've talked about doing very good work this weekend, but just not meant for this sort of game.
Favorite hot plate is on chum blocking duty. Not interested in taking any damage. He doesn't have to.
Yeah, you can see, Ross's plan is pretty clear here. I'm just going to kill you in 2 turns.
Yep.
There's a very limited range of cards that allow you to interact here.
Especially with a God's Willing hand. He might as well have a sign on his forehead.
He needs to have Dromoka's command for the Aqueous form.
Yeah.
Then Chris could actually turn the game around very quickly because he's attacking for a lot of damage.
There's Morph.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last
Here's Fleecemane Lion.
today's standard.
There's a manifest trigger. Pass the turn back. Now, there are some cards that Chris can draw here depending on how he's composed his deck after sideboard.
Well, keep in mind also that Chris actually has 14 points of damage in play right now.
Yep.
So, assuming that the card face down is a Den Protector. So, Ross needs to at least produce a chump blocker.
Take a look at the scry. That card's going to go down. And for 5 more points of damage, you mentioned there's 14 power out there because that Morph is a Den Protector. Ross will have to take 1. He's down to 13. There's Seeker the way past the turn back. Chris can draw a card like Dromoka's Command here. That'll be fantastic. He can draw a card like Mastery of the Unseen. That'll be good. Gain a bunch of life. As it stands, he needs to draw something good. It's another copy of Den Protector. One of the few times it's been bad this weekend.
This is the first game I believe I've seen of the entire weekend where Den Protector has just been kind of crappy.
Yep.
So, and that's, again, a function of the way that Ross's deck is built. He's not putting stuff in Chris's graveyard. He's not trading cards. That's not what his deck's about.
Now, the big question here is, what are those manifest cards for Chris? Because let's say that one of those manifest cards is a card like Dromoka's Command. The goal is to somehow get one of those in the graveyard and then get it back with Den Protector.
The biggest issue here is I think that if Chris attacks everything, Ross is just going to say, Seeker the way in front of Whisperwood Elementals, preserve the most damage. I'm not taking lethal, and do your worst.
Okay. Is there a way to make a weird attack? Assuming that one of those manifest cards is, Dromoka's Command or Master of the Unseen. I don't know if that's the case.
And if Chris flips up something big to generate lethal this turn, I believe Ross has a 1-mana spell in his hand, so he can just cast that to trigger lifelink on Seeker of the Way, and most likely survive whatever it is that Chris has down there.
Yep. There's your block. You have to imagine it's in front of the biggest creature. The way that Ross is blocking here and the way he's handling a Seeker of the Way is just going to die.
Ross's cards have kind of been face up on the table for a while now.
They really have been.
You're at 15. I'm going to make this a 5-5. I'm going to hit you 3 times, and I'm going to preserve my life total in the largest increments I possibly can to hope to get across the finish line.
There goes the Seeker. Chris will play a copy of Windswept Heath. Manifest. Pass the turn back. Ross will play Mana Confluence. Pretty simple. Attack. Scry. Yep, that does it. Doesn't have to be too tough sometimes. Big win there for Ross Merriam. He wins this match 2-0 over Chris Andersen. Bant Heroic moves on to 11-2. That's 13 rounds in the books for Merriam. He's got 2 to go. He might be in double draw territory. He might be 1-1 territory. Not entirely sure. We'll see how things go, but he's in a great position to make top 8.
Remember, he was second place